And welcome to On Deck with Marlin Magazine. Thank you for joining. Today we're hosting a webinar with Jamie Simmons. Jamie is the product manager with Imtra, and we're discussing Zipwake. So this is a great product. Jamie, you're actually on vacation this week, so thank you very much for taking some time and spending a little bit of time with us. So where are you? What are you up to?
Pleasure to be with you, Sam. Thanks for having me. Actually up in Martha's Vineyard for the week. So bit of the tail end here of the season. We got the fall run in full swing and slowing down a little bit, but fishing the Martha's Vineyard Derby, pretty well-known derby here in the Northeast. Been going on for a long, long time. So getting a few days of inshore in before the end of the season. So yeah, nice to be on the water this week and glad to be joining you today.
Gotcha. Yeah. Once again, thank you so much for your time. Jamie, product manager at Imtra, is the expert on the Zipwake product. So we did a recorded Q&A a couple of weeks ago where we went through a lot of the features and benefits. This is a really great, unique product. So we're going to play that for you here in just a moment. But don't forget, you can ask questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And at the end of the pre-recorded Q&A, Jamie and I will be back live and we'll go through all of the questions that anyone may have. So as we're going through this, use that Q&A button. You can post questions live and we'll review them as we come up. So other than that, we're ready to roll. So let's get into a discussion of Zipwake. Hi, and welcome to On Deck with Marlin Magazine. I'm Sam White. I'm the editor-in-chief of Marlin. And today we're talking about Zipwake with Imtra, which is a dynamic control system. It was introduced to the marine market in 2014, and it's really a great product. Today we're fortunate that we have Jamie Simmons with us. Jamie is the product manager for Zipwake at Imtra. So welcome, Jamie.
Thanks for having me, Sam.
Sounds like this is a great product. But first of all, let's back up a second and talk about what an interceptor is and how an interceptor differs from a trim tab.
So interceptor, very similar in the same idea as a traditional trim system. They're both going to generate lift. Interceptor is a little bit different as it comes directly off the transom, and it's a blade that goes straight up and down vertically in the water column, opposed to coming off electric or hydraulic actuator from an angle coming off the transom, or a recessed traditional tab that would be in a pocket. So same concept, both are going to generate lift. An interceptor, the stroke is much smaller, so anywhere from 30 millimeters up to 80, 100 millimeters, depending on what type of interceptor you have in the market. But very short stroke, just a little bit a different way of generating lift to help with that pitch and roll control. But a lot of benefits, especially when it comes to efficiency for the interceptors over your traditional trim tabs.
Gotcha. And one of the other benefits is dynamic trim control. And let's talk about what that really means for a minute.
One of the greatest features of the Zipwake system is it's going to be fully automatic. So you have a couple different things in the control head that help with that. You have a 3D gyro sensor, an accelerometer, and a GPS antenna. So it's going to use those three different tools to help. It's going to do pitch fully automatic. So throughout your whole throttle range, it's going to know exactly how much blade you need in the water to generate lift to reach your optimal pitch. And then it's going to use that accelerometer and 3D gyro sensor to help with that side-to-side movement, whether it be in a seaway or if you have an uneven load or list to one side.
Now, how does that product work in conjunction with boats with gyro stabilizers?
Actually, great. We get that question fairly often, especially when it comes to this type of market, especially the Marlin people that are interested in doing pelagic fishing and offshore. A lot of the boats are going to have gyros. It's very common because their gyros are fantastic for that slower speed, trolling speeds, or even at the drift, where a lot of these boats spend a lot of time when they're actually fishing. And interceptors are kind of, not going to offer too much benefits on that slower end speed where the gyro is super effective because we just don't have enough flow to generate lift. And basically you have the best of both worlds. The gyro is going to do a really nice job on your slow speeds and trolling speeds. As you accelerate, the gyro is going to taper off in terms of efficiency. And that's where the interceptors start to excel. So at that speed, when you start getting up to cruise speed, there's going to be enough flow, and then the interceptor is going to take over and add that comfort feature as well.
So it really is like having the best of both worlds. The gyro is going to work at those slower speeds, trolling speeds, and then the interceptor is going to take over as you're running, once you get up on plane and start running the boat.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a really nice, they work great together. It's a really nice, it's really nice to have both in a boat that's doing this type of fishing. super comfort. So you get that comfort across the board throughout your whole throttle range, opposed to just down on the lower end. And, there's some other great benefits as well as efficiency and that comfort that we mentioned as well.
Sure. Now, there's two different families of Zipwake products. There's a Series S for smaller boats that are 20 to say 50 feet. And then the larger series, the Series E, from 50 feet all the way up to 100 feet. So what are the primary differences in those two products?
So Zipwake started with Series S back in 2014. The biggest difference really is going to come to stroke. So how far that blade penetrates down into the water column. The Series S has a 30 mil stroke, and the Series E is going to have a 60 mil stroke. So twice the stroke. And what it really comes down to is once you get to a certain size boat that requires a certain amount of lift to achieve those optimal pitch angles and be able to generate enough lift to counteract that roll control or list, you're going to need a deeper stroke in the water to be able to support that much, provide that much lift for those boats. So the Series S is a fantastic option for a lot of your common recreational boats, whether it be dual consoles, center consoles, motor yachts, boats up to about 40, 50 feet. And then there's a little gray area in the middle. And then once you hit that 40-foot area, and depending on how you're using the boat as well, if you use the boat a lot and you're fishing a ton, or say you have, a light commercial use boat, we try to put them into the heavier duty system, the Series E. So if you're in that 40 to 50 foot range, there's a little gray area there you could overlap, but basically from that 40 foot and up to about 120, 130, you'd really be in that Series E system, which would generally require, you're going to need that deeper stroke to provide more lift. And then those units also have a dual servo. The Series S have a single servo. So you have two servos in the larger units and some updated stainless steel components in the drive shafts internally on those motors.
Okay, so just a little bit more rugged, a little bit beefier product.
Much more robust, designed so they can handle those heavier loads and provide more lift for the larger boats.
Now, the Zipwake product, you can also put in multiple products though, right? Because it's not just a conventional trim tab where you would only have, let's say, 2 trim tabs. You can put in additional Zipwake interceptors across the transom though, right?
Yeah, so it's a really nice way they went about it, Zipwake. It's basically they have a variety of different shapes and sizes, depending on what type of application, whether it be a brand new build or aftermarket. Basically, we can take a look at your transom, see what you might need, depending on how you use the boat and how it handles, and be able to come up with some type of solution for you, whether it be just a single pair, one on each side, or up to 6 total. So we can, we have a lot of different options depending on what the application requires.
Mm-hmm. Now, what about boats with prop pockets?
So we also have, in the Series E only, we do have 3 different tunnel interceptor options depending on the radius of the tunnels. That's another great way, especially on some of the sport fish boats that have tunnels, to be able to utilize that tunnel space where you traditionally wouldn't be able to utilize that with standard trim tabs. So really, really nice that we can, utilize that space over the tunnels as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's talk about displays for a minute. So what do the displays look like for these products, and can you integrate these with your standard multifunction displays?
Yeah, so the panel is almost like, in terms of footprint, is identical. Both series are identical. The interface is going to be slightly different on the Series E than the Series S, but same concept. They work the same way in terms of the brains and the algorithms. Real nice little display. You want it right on your helm position. There's no external sensors or anything like that. So you have a single cable coming up from the bilge and it plugs into that control. So you don't have to hook up any additional wires or anything like that. And in the cabling is all Canva style. So nice plug and play. And then all those things are built right into the panel. So really nice and compact. And then you can also daisy chain as many controls if you want. So say you had a tower or a aft station, you can add an additional one there. But nice size control, not too large, but you definitely want to have that on your dash in an area that's accessible for the person running the boat, so you could see what's going on. But remember, it does have that fully automatic feature. So that's really the best part. If you put it in auto, the reality is to set it properly, you really don't have to touch it much. You can fine tune it from that point, but the whole point is basically you put it in auto and you're good to go.
Set it and forget it. You got to love that.
Exactly.
Let's talk about refits for a minute. This seems like a great product to refit a current boat with trim tabs. And let's say you want to make that next step up to an interceptor. So let's talk about that for a minute. How would that work, let's say, for an older boat, like an older Viking or Bertram? How would that work? So
we do a lot of aftermarket refits. Common situations are if they have an older system that might need to be updated, if there's something wrong with it, a failed actuator. Sometimes we get a call with people interested in possibly making the upgrade to an interceptor system. there are a couple things that you really have to keep in mind for the interceptors in terms of installation. The units do require it to be on a perfectly flat surface. So a lot of most boats don't really have a flat transom. Most people think they are flat, but when you actually put a straight edge on there and it's covering quite a bit of span, you're going to see some type of curvature there. So one of the things that is common with the aftermarket, especially larger boats, is you are going to have to do some glass work. Not only for, usually they are going to glass a nice flat pad for that interceptor so it can sit on, but if you have recessed pockets with the existing trim tabs, sometimes you'll have to fill in those pockets as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So fairly common. It's not overly complicated in terms of the installation. As long as you have that flat surface area, it's very simple, very straightforward. Like I said before, all the cables are all plug and play, and the installation is very simple.
Mm-hmm. Plus, it sounds like you gain so many benefits with the dynamic trim control compared to a conventional trim tab setup. Plus, it's a much more efficient system as well.
Yeah, exactly. Especially with the older style sportfish style boats, a little heavier, maybe not as fast as some of the stuff we're seeing coming in the market now. Some of those boats, could use a little bit of lift generation in the transom, a little bit more lift, and help them get out of the water. Mm-hmm. And those are the boats that you're really going to see some of the really big improvements in terms of efficiency and actually speed. Because they're kind of on the edge of the hump there at some of those lower speeds and that low 18 to 20, 25 knot range. Some of them just need a little bit more lift, especially when if you're fully loaded or you have live wells back there, they could use a little bit more lift. And generally, we're going to be able to provide more lift generation per the span of those old traditional trim tabs. So not only are they going to see fuel efficiency gains, they're probably going to see some speed as well.
Hey, no one ever complained about going faster.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't think anyone.
Let's talk about fishing for a minute. You're a Marlin tuna guy up in the Northeast. What are some of the benefits for the hardcore fish guys like us?
Yeah, there's a lot of great benefits. I would say, I think one of the greatest benefits is probably the efficiency. Whether you're running up where we are, we're running a minimum 85, 90 miles out to the canyons up here. I know everywhere is not exactly that far. Most people kind of laugh at us up here. We run so far to catch fish, but it adds up. If you're running a 40, 50, 60 foot, 70 foot boat, if you can gain even 5, 6, 7% on fuel efficiency, that's a lot. One other thing that's really beneficial too is a lot of these boats are tournament fishing or they have live wells on the deck, pretty heavy loaded with ice, bait. Sometimes that puts those boats in a position where they're really kind of off balance. They're not running the way in terms of weight distribution that they're designed to. So they're not as efficient as they're designed to with those additional weight, usually aft. And then those interceptors are really going to help get a little bit more lift generation and help in those situations. Not only for getting that transom out of the water, but also for uneven loads. So say you had, big fish hold on one side full, or one of your fuel tanks was, you're draining on one fuel tank and you have a slight list, you can easily counteract that and keep the boat flat with a Zipwake system, which is a really nice feature.
Now, does dynamic trim control do that part automatically as well, or is that something you need input from the captain?
Yeah, so if you put in auto and it's an auto pitch and roll, it's automatically going to do that. So on that gyro sensor, it's going to sense if you have a list in one direction or the other, and it's going to drop that interceptor on that side down and create more lift on that side of the hull to be able to lift it up and counteract it. So it's automatically going to be keeping that boat as flat as possible. It depends on how you want to run it. The system could be running fully auto, like I said before, pitch and roll. It could be running auto pitch. So if you're in a situation where you really just don't want the roll control, you can have it just do your pitch for you. And then you can also do fully manual. So actually pretty popular in this style boat. A lot of sport fishing boats, a lot of the boats like to actually run in manual because they like that ability to kind of customize how the boat handles in a certain situation. So you can, bring one rail down a little bit to help for spray or bury the nose a little bit more, depending on if you're in a steep head sea. So that's kind of a nice feature if you really want to get in there and kind of fine tune it.
Sure. And don't worry, I'm on the central west coast of Florida. So our offshore runs here are 75 to 150 miles too. So we're doing the same thing.
Yep.
You're absolutely right. Any little bit of speed gain or efficiency gain that we can get really makes a big difference when you're going that far. We're doing multiple days, so real similar to your situation in the canyons. So that's just a great benefit. To mention, and we haven't even touched on the fact that now you don't have a protruding trim tab. So the transom of the boat is virtually clean. So there's nothing back there protruding off the back of the boat.
Yeah, that's a really nice feature, especially if you're fishing for marlin or billfish and you're backing down on fish. They automatically go up into the housing. So if say you had a situation where a line would go down the transom, you have nothing there hanging below, which is really nice. So you don't have to worry about anything sticking off the transom, which you have to generally with the old traditional tabs. Really nice. You're not going to break off or anything like that. One of the other nice things too is pretty common if you back down pretty hard and you forget to bring your old trim tabs up, it's very easy to snap them off or break the actuators. Mm-hmm. So another really nice feature there. You're not going to have nearly as much drag and they automatically come up for you. So that's something you never really have to worry about.
So the interceptor is basically tied into the to the transmission control. So it knows when the transmissions go into reverse to try to say, hey, I need to come up, right?
It's not tied into the transmission controls, but it's able to do that with that the GPS antenna.
GPS antenna. Okay, gotcha. Product availability. Product availability has been a big issue in the industry right now. Are these products available to be shipped right now, or is there a waiting list? What's the situation with Zipwake there?
Yeah, as we know, for the marine industry, it's been a very busy, I guess, 2 years now. People really trying to get out in the water, enjoy boating, and product availability has certainly been a challenging part of it, especially with the coronavirus over the last couple of years. Well, luckily, we've been in a great situation with Zipwake, and they've done a fantastic job of being able to supply us with product, and it is readily available. So, I mean, we have a large stocking position here in the States and should be able to fill orders almost. If you place an order one day, chances are it's probably going to ship the next day or the same day even. So, you don't have to worry about any, say you have any issues with service related parts or you need anything like that. We have all that stuff readily available and easy to get. So also a really nice thing for if you're, buying a system and you ever need that type of service or anything. We're very quick to respond to those type of situations and have stock of it.
Well, and one point you just touched on, let's talk about reliability. I mean, it sounds like this is almost a bulletproof system, but let's talk about, what goes into this and the engineering side.
Yeah, they're a fantastic system. They're a little bit different. There's a little bit of an education that has to happen, especially with the end user with interceptors. You can't just slap them on the transom and everything's good without any maintenance. They do require a little bit of maintenance, which is important. And one of the things that is important is growth with interceptors. So essentially, you have basically a sandwich configuration. You have a front plate, a back plate, and a blade that's in the middle. If you don't stay on top of the growth and take care of that, you could run into situations where you overload that blade and it starts to bind up. So that's a really important maintenance point for interceptors. And basically, there's a couple things in there. We have an auto clean system built into the Zipwake system that you can set it on an interval, whether it be 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours. Basically, what that system's going to do is it's going to do a sweep cycle on that interval, and there's a scraper on the backside, and it's going to keep that growth off the blade. So if you have a boat that stays in the water for more than 2 or 3 weeks at a time, you want to make sure that auto clean system is definitely turned on and working, and to make sure that all that growth stays down. And then we always recommend too, if you're hauling the boat for any type of maintenance, at least once a year, you want to remove that front plate and power wash all the internal components and then reinstall the units back on. Make sure everything's nice and clean and tidied up, just like anything else you do with your props and bottom. Make sure they're nice and clean.
Sure. That's great advice for anybody. Now, what about anti-fouling coatings like a prop speed or something like that? Is this a product you can paint with that?
Absolutely. We recommend, believe it or not, even with a Teflon-based material, a standard anti-fouling actually holds quite nicely. Better than most people would think. I would say most people are using just a standard anti-fouling. You can just run a little bit of a grit on the outside housing and scuff it up slightly. And the only areas you want to just keep in mind not to put paint on is where the blades are moving. So you want to tape over the bottom portion of where the blade comes out of the housing and the sides, just where the edges are. And then you can paint the whole housing. So that's super helpful for growth. And then the prop speed as well. We do have some users, especially out on the West Coast, that are using that type of product, a prop speed with a clear coat that's sprayed on. and that seems to be work quite well as well. So really just depends on what you want to use, but both seem to work pretty well.
Sure. And what level of fouling you have in the conditions where you are, whether you may be in Costa Rica year round, which is pretty bad, or you may be in the Northeast where it might not be quite so aggressive. So
exactly. And it really depends on how often you're using the boat too. If you're using the boat regularly, weekly, it's essentially the same thing as the cleaning function. The blades are operating, they're going to stay clean. If you're leaving the boat for long periods of time and they're sitting there, you definitely want to have those things painted properly, and you definitely want to have the auto clean function going.
Well, haul out season is almost upon us, as you know. So that's going to be a topic of conversation on the docks soon enough. So
it is.
Yeah. Well, Jamie, I believe that's about all I have to cover. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think that's it, Sam.
Well, once again, thank you for your time today. Appreciate you being here at On Deck with Marlin Magazine, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you, Sam. Thanks for having me.
And that was the pre-recorded portion of On Deck with Zipwake and Jamie Simmons. Looks like we do have one question. We are back live. Before we get into that, just a quick note that if you came in a little bit late, we will email you a link to the entire webinar. So it's the same email that we sent your invitation. You'll get a link once the entire webinar is ready. So no worries there. If you have any additional questions, feel free to use that Q&A button down in your console, and we'll get started. We have our first one from Vincent. He says, I have a 44 Sportfish. Can I keep my recessed trim tabs and add interceptors? So that's a great question from Vincent. Jamie, what do you think?
Yeah, Vincent, that's a great question. Certainly that's a pretty common question we get from our customers. Most of the time, I must say, you do remove the existing trim tabs, because a lot of times that space where the existing trim tabs are is most likely the best spot to put the interceptors, and you're going to be limited in terms of space and span on a transom of where we can get that lift generation. So I'd have to say most of the time, depending on how the pocket is, we've had a few installations where they've been able to leave the trim tabs, but if we're going over the top of them, most of the time we're going to have to fill in those pockets, because we're going to need to utilize that space, because usually they're farther outboard, and you want to get those interceptors as far outboard as possible. And a lot of times, on most transom, especially on a 44 footer, we're really going to be limited. There's not going to be a ton of space there, so we're probably going to have to utilize that space. And another thing to keep in mind too, if we were putting that interceptor across the back of a pocket, if the pocket's on the transom, it's going to create some issues to be able to fasten down that back plate. There's going to be a void there from that pocket. So a lot of times it's not going to work, but it certainly is a good question. If you had recessed tabs that went flush in the all the way up position and there was solid glass across the transom, you could certainly look at that option, but it is a little redundant. So, most of the time, I would say 9 out of 10 times, we're usually just removing those trim tabs and filling in those pockets.
Yeah, and Vincent actually had a follow-up. He says it's a 44 Henriques, which is a beautiful boat, by the way, 44 Henriques with a 9-degree dead rise. And he said it's kind of hard in the head sea. He wants to know, what series would you recommend? So it's a 44 footer, and this is kind of where we talked about before. It's a little bit in that area in between the two series. So for 44 Sportfish, what do you think?
Yeah, 44 Henriques really depends on how you're using it, Vincent. I would say if you're fishing it pretty hard, and you're requiring a little bit more lift generation, you want to get that bow down. I would certainly side for the Series E equipment for that boat. Most likely is probably just going to be a pair, so one interceptor outboard on each side. Probably looking at a set of 600Es or 800Es. Pretty simple system, just one on each side, and I think that would be probably best suited for that boat.
Great answer. Next up from Colin Emsley says, I have a 36-foot lobster boat and it cruises at 13 knots. Wants to know if the Zipwake system will be effective. Lobster boat 13 knots. What do you think?
Colin, great question. I'm a Down East boat owner myself, so very familiar with Down East boats up here in New England. The issue you're going to see here at 13 knots is you're going to be pretty limited with flow at that speed. You're not really generating enough flow. I would say you would probably see some lift benefits in terms of pitch control if we got decent amount of span on the transom. However, your roll control is going to be quite limited, because without enough flow, we're going to be limited on the reaction time of the lift generation for the roll control. So I don't think your roll control, aspect of the system would be very high performance, but you would certainly see some pitch benefits there. If you said 14 to 16 knots, I would feel a little bit better, especially for that roll control, just because we have a little more flow there. But down at 13 knots is kind of on the edge there.
Yeah. Julio says, very interesting performing device. Coordination ability with the gyro is also great. So not really a question, but yeah, we had touched on during the Q&A that the ability of the Zipwake system to automatically control the performance of the boat at higher speeds, whereas the gyro is going to take over at those lower speeds, is something that we had touched on. So maybe just hit that real quick for Julio.
Yeah, Julio, great point. I mean, they really are fantastic together. They just work fantastic together, especially for people that are fishing. Like I said, gyro fantastic for those at drift or troll speeds. And it's really going to take care of that roll moment there. But those interceptors are going to take over, especially where that gyro starts to taper off with efficiency up to cruising speeds. The faster you go, the less efficient they're going to be. And then that's where those gyros are going to excel when we have enough flow there. So really nice, especially if you get them dialed in together. It's a great pair.
Yeah, absolutely. And Vincent's back with the 44 Sportfish. He says fishing real hard. So hey, good for you, man. Let's go get him this season. Brent Moore has a question. He says, what is the recommended maintenance interval for taking the faceplate off and pressure washing the internals? Are there any other standard maintenance items that should be completed on a schedule? So what's the maintenance schedule on that sort of thing?
Brent, great question. We recommend to do it once a year for the full power wash. So, you definitely, as we mentioned, you definitely want to have those units painted if the boat's staying in the water. For power washing, at least once a season is the minimum. Like I said, anytime you do haul the boat out and you do see some growth there, if you have another chance to do an additional power wash and make sure they're clean, I would certainly recommend that. And then that's really it. I mean, you got to keep the units clean, keep the growth down, and that's really it when it comes to maintenance.
Just the same thing we always think about with your wheels and struts and rudders and everything else. You got to keep it clean. So Vincent is back with another question. He says, for the 600 to 800 E series, what would be a roundabout cost installed? And this sort of touches on another question that a friend of mine asked. He says, is this a suitable project for a do-it-yourselfer, or do you recommend a professional installation? And so I'm sure that that's going to be tied into the cost as well. So do it yourself, leave it to a pro. What's the roundabout number on that, you think?
For the Series E equipment, certainly going to be a little bit more pricey than your Series S equipment, Vincent, especially for your boat. You're going to be looking at this. Keep in mind, this is retail prices. You're probably looking in the $6,000 to $10,000 range, depending on what Series E system you go with, and that would be the cost for the equipment only. In terms of cost of installation, that's certainly going to vary depending on who's doing the work for you, and depending if you need glass work and whatnot, could also sway that number much higher, or if you have a flat, clean transom, that could certainly be a lot less in terms of hours to do the installation. So as we know now, labor is not, it's pretty high up there. So if those hours add up, especially with like additional glasswork, you could certainly add quite a bit more cost to the project. I would say if everything is, a flat transom and everything is plug and play, like I said, with the cables, and there's no hiccups, you could easily get this job done or in a day or two of labor. So that kind of gives you an idea. But you keep in mind, there are a lot of variables that could make that extended in terms of labor, especially if you need some glass work done.
Yeah, that's always a moving target these days anyway. So, okay, Michael is up next. He says, I run a 58-foot Express. The vessel is equipped with underwater exhaust and the tabs are pretty close to the center line of the boat. What series would you recommend? So 58 Express.
Yeah, 58 Express, certainly going to be in Series E equipment. So I would certainly go for the larger units, especially if the tab location, if we can't utilize that outboard space where your exhausts are, and they have to be a little bit more down on center line, we're definitely going to want to go with the heavier duty units, because the farther outboard we can get, the more efficient we are, especially for the roll control. The further you get down towards the keel, it requires more lift generation to swing that movement. So yeah, I would definitely recommend the Series E. And we're happy to take a look at that. If you wanted to reach out to me, I can if you have some pictures and measurements, I'm happy to make a recommendation for you, Michael.
Yeah, and you touched on a great point, and that's one thing where it's always great to have a product specialist like Jamie and his team, because anytime that you have any of those specific questions, you say, well, my boat has prop pockets, or my boat has tunnels, or rudder configurations, or anything like that. These people can always really help you hone in on the right product for your application, for the type of fishing you do, for the amount of time you use the boat, for the different style of boat. That's just great to be able to have that professional advice. So it looks like that is almost to the end. Oh, Colin's back again. He says, what kind of unit for a Jarvis Newman 36?
Colin, I believe you mentioned your boat was cruising at 13 knots. So Jarvis Newman 36, depends if it's how you're using the boat. If you're using the boat, commercially or fishing it pretty hard, I would side for the Series E units. But I believe I might have spoke to you previously. If you're using it recreationally, and I would probably stick with the Series S and probably go with the 750 kit, 750 millimeter unit on each side. That should be more than adequate for a Jarvis Newman 36. If the boat had a little bit more speed, I'd say you'd probably be able to get away with the 600s. But based on the speed that you're showing for cruise at 13 knots, I would go with a little bit more interceptor span just to help with more lift generation. So definitely, I think that 750 millimeter Series S would probably be best for you.
Well, we'll give everybody just another minute or two, see if there's any additional questions. But Jamie, once again, want to say thank you very much for taking some time off your vacation to be with us, and good luck in the Derby. Sounds like a great event up there in the Northeast. So be safe out there, have some fun.
Thank you, Sam. Thanks to everyone for chiming in today. And if you have any other questions, looks like we might have another one here about a True North 38. But if you do have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us at Imtra. You can go to imtra.com and all our contact information is there. We have a great learning center with a bunch of articles that dig into interceptors and the technology and how they work and some benefits. We have that great learning center. Then feel free to give us a call or give anyone a call in the office for additional help or system recommendation. But looks like, Chris, we have 38-foot True North. Yeah, pretty familiar with the boat. I would say depending on what you're looking for out of it, I mean, it's important to know if you're looking for more roll control or pitch control. Depending on what you're looking for out of the system would probably steer me in one direction or the other between the series. I would probably say that you're probably in that 600 to 750 millimeter Series S. I don't think you're quite on the Series E side of things, but depending on how you're using it, might sway me in a direction. So a little bit more information might be helpful.
And Vincent wants to know, what's the best way to get in touch with you and your staff at Imtra for more information on the Zipwake system?
Vincent, you can reach me at Jamie. It's JAMIE at imtra.com.
Or just go through the website. I'm sure they can find you through the website as well. So.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, well, we'll give them just another minute, make sure there's no other questions. But once again, very informative. It's a great product. It's a great system. A lot of benefits. Really can't thank you enough, Jamie. It was always a pleasure.
Thank you, Sam.
And that looks like it. So we're going to wrap it up. Once again, if you joined us a little bit late or you want to be able to review this, you will get a link to the full webinar once it's ready. So stay tuned and we'll go from there. But once again, everyone, thank you for joining us for On Deck with Marlin Magazine and Imtra. So hope you all have a great day and stay safe on the water.